Welcome, folks, to the 115th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, and I am an airplane nerd. I've spent 60 years in the aviation field as a KC-135 pilot, a veteran of four wars, weapons school graduate, and a graduate of the Joint Combined Warfighter School. I've taught people how to run air campaigns. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we debrief some of the most fascinating, intriguing pilots, aircrew members, aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these crazy and intense military, commercial, and even general aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. And some of the stories that you hear on the Lessons from the Cockpit show are being told for the very first time. Today, little different. We're going to talk about current events. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and we're going to get into what's going on in the Caribbean, Venezuela, the sinking of all these drug boats. But this episode is supported by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home office or hangar. You can see one behind me here. That's my airplane, 8874, when I was stationed at Kadena. These are 4, 6, and 8-foot long prints on vinyl that you peel off and stick to the walls of your home office or hangar. We have 168 ready to print right now at wallpilot.com. But if there's an airplane that you want, your favorite airplane with your name on it, the unit it's from, weapons load, then let us do a custom one for you. And all that can be found at wallpilot.com. So let's get into what's happening. We're kind of doing one of my dimes, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic kind of summaries of what's going on. We're going to cut in some video. We've destroyed 6 drug boats now. And of course, things look like we might be striking targets in Venezuela. So grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the nation's dime and talk about Venezuela and maritime operations in the Caribbean. I think there's a couple of frameworks we can use to capture all of this. The first one is, and I've mentioned this so many times before, DIME, the elements of national power: diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. And folks, there's some things about Venezuela, particularly economically, they're going to surprise you, surprise me. I went back and looked at the second season of Jack Ryan, the very first episode, and there was some very fascinating things when he was teaching a group of students that I'm going to bring up here. Uh, I want to also look at maritime operations from the find, fix, and finish targeting cycle. And I'm going to talk about, how do you find targets in an open ocean? And it's actually easier than you think now. Not only because of drones, but because of other equipment that are on airplanes, particularly like the F-15 and the F-16 that have what's called Dragon Eye. So let's just jump into this. Let's look at this, first of all, again, from the diplomatic point of view. You had Hugo Chavez, communist. They have very strong ties with Russia. When Hugo Chavez passed away, Maduro took over. Yeah, there was an election. And if you think stolen elections aren't a big deal, that one was truly stolen. 98% of the people voted for Maduro. Do you believe that? No, of course not. The diplomatic ties they also have with Iran are also very interesting. Did you know that there is a nonstop flight from Tehran, Iran to Caracas, Venezuela. And here's another thing I didn't know. One of the largest mosques, I think like in the top three in the Western Hemisphere, guess where it is? It's in Venezuela. So there's a lot of diplomatic stuff going on behind the scene, and particularly Maduro trying to upset everything that's going on in the United States. Maduro let the prisons open, and one of the most criminal gangs in the world, Tren de Aragua, TDE, TDA, came here in our borders. And they're here. Now, Trump administration has been sending them out to Ecuador. And there's a max prison down there in Ecuador that they're putting all these gentlemen in. But remember all the problems we had in Colorado with TDA taking over buildings, taking over apartment complexes? Folks, that was done on purpose. And that was because of the president, Maduro, of Venezuela. And you can go look all this up. I'm not just, you know, talking about this without a whole lot of knowledge. I've been following this for a while. And it's not just TDA. There's other groups that are here that presidents and leaders of countries have sent here. And during the time period where our border was open, they came in. We aren't even close to gathering all these people up. And some of these folks are hard criminals. And Maduro knew that. Maduro knew that. Tren de Aragua actually took over an entire prison and was using it as their headquarters. And Maduro let them. And now those people are here. Diplomatically, we've cut off just about everything to Venezuela. I don't think we have an ambassador down there. I'm going to have to look this up. Our consulate may be closed down there. But there are some pretty scary partners with Venezuela and Maduro, Iran and Russia. And as most of you know, the Trump administration just canceled talks with Putin over the war in Ukraine because he didn't think he'd act in faith. I'm going to try and cut in a video here from a Russian news team that shows one of the T-160 White Swan strategic bombers landing in Caracas, Venezuela, a couple years ago. And you have to understand, if Venezuela is attacked, then we got to be looking over our shoulders at the Russians because they have modern equipment. And of course, the Tu-160 White Swan and many other bombers that Russia has are capable of launching cruise missiles that could reach the United States. They're also capable of maritime operations against a carrier battle group or a surface warfare group, an amphibious ready group, all of those things, if they get involved. But they're already involved because Putin has given them some incredible military equipment, which I'll get to here in just a minute. Now, informationally, Maduro has already come out and said, we got to get rid of him. The Trump administration, we got to get rid of President Trump. And there's been a lot of rhetoric going back and forth between President Trump, as you know, who doesn't take a whole lot of crap from people, and Maduro. And informationally, propaganda wise, he has been showing that his military is getting ready. And again, we'll talk about the air, land, and sea order of battle here in just a second. But there's been a lot of talk back and forth from Maduro and leaders in Venezuela to the current administration, both Trump and Marco Rubio. And I expect that to get more intense. It always does, right before some war starts or before some conflict starts. It always does. Go back and look at Desert Storm and all the things that Saddam said, you know, we're going to make you guys die like dogs. Didn't quite work out that way. So let's go on to military. Air order of battle. Venezuela has F-16s. We don't know how many of them are operational because obviously we've cut off the logistics to them. They're not carrying radar-guided missiles like AMRAAM, fortunately. They have AIM-9 Mike Sidewinders, but they also have something else. They've got Israeli Python 4. And I've seen numerous pictures of the Venezuelan F-16s carrying AIM-9 Mike heaters on the wingtips and Python 4 on the wings. And you have to understand, Python 4 is one of the best heat-seeking missiles created in the world, almost on par with AIM-9X. Matter of fact, when I was at the Operational Test and Evaluation Center headquarters, we were trying to model AIM-9X Block 2 after Python 4 and 5 because of its capabilities. Its capabilities for lock-on after launch, its capabilities for a very wide field of view, and some other capabilities that make that missile a very, very potent air-to-air missile. It has pretty good legs too. So their F-16s are only carrying heater missiles and a gun, but still, it's an F-16. And their pilots obviously are not going to be as proficient as the Americans, but it's still a threat. The bigger threat that I'm worried about is the 24 Su-30, I think they're SMKs, that Venezuelans have. That's the two-seat version of the flanker. That is also a very capable aircraft, not only in an air-to-air role, but also air-to-ground, air-to-surface. Let's say air-to-surface, because we want to include land and sea. And that flanker can carry hypersonic missiles, such as anti-ship missiles, that, of course, the Russians could give them. Air defense wise, Venezuela has a lot of older SA-3 GOA type of missiles. Those of you that have watched the Top Gun Maverick, that's the same missile, SA-3s that were guarding that valley to the nuke plant. Older missile, still very capable. So obviously we're going to try and find those. Some of those are on mobile vehicles though, so they can travel around. And that makes dynamic targeting of those a lot more difficult. And so our rules of engagement have to include mobile SAM sites. The one that I'd be most concerned about is the S-300s, the Giant. It is a very capable uh, maybe version 4, 4.5 missile, air defense missile that Venezuela owns. These are the same S-300s that you've seen shooting down drones and planes in Ukraine and Russia, but it's also mobile radar, mobile transporter electro launchers for the missiles. So again, that makes this a more difficult target set to go after because they can just move it. Now, the airfields that they have are spread out all over Caracas, numerous places. They have airlift airplanes that can carry troops. They have trainers. They don't have AWACS. They don't have tankers. So when you're out of missiles and out of gas, those things are landing. But those are still very capable aircraft. And as I mentioned to you, I taught air campaign planning. And John Warden wrote a great book called The Air Campaign Planning for Combat that all of you should go read now because it basically gives the blueprint for how we do an air campaign. And the very first thing we do is we go in and we knock down the door. We take out all the SAM sites, we take out all the flankers, take out all the Vipers. Basically, we lay the country bare to air attack. And there's numerous ways we can do that. Tomahawk land attack missiles, air-launched cruise missiles. We now have a new low observable long-range missile called JASM. The B-1s used them in Syria when Trump and his first administration made the airstrikes on the chemical weapons facilities. There is also a anti-ship version of that called LRASM, long-range anti-ship missile. And it's very similar missiles. One made for taking out ground targets, one made for, hunting ships. Long range and again, low observable. And you have to remember, folks, we have the system called Rapid Dragon. The Rapid Dragon system puts pallets of 4 missiles on cargo airplanes, C-130s, C-17s, and drops them, parachutes them, extraction out the back, and they tip over and these things launch out of them. And you can put a lot of pallets of Rapid Dragon on a C-17. And with Tomahawk land attack missiles, the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, JASM, and LRASM, we've got a lot of capabilities to take out their air defenses. Now, their Navy, not a whole lot. They've got one frigate and patrol boats and other things. They had submarines, but everything I've read said they're incapable of deploying. Now, that doesn't mean they do a very rapid overhaul and arm these things up and get them ready to go. But again, the group that we'll have down there will be able to take care of that. All right. Land forces, about 123,000 in their military. There was, I think, about 60,000 in their reserves, but they also have a very, very robust militia down there that can cause us headaches. So that's kind of the air, sea, land order of battle, as we call it, for Venezuela. Now let's move on to economic. Here's some very interesting stats, folks. The largest deposits of oil are in Venezuela. Now, that oil is what we call heavy crude. It's hard to refine, right? You've heard light sweet uh, and heavy sour, and the Venezuelan is oil is more the heavy sour type. So that oil is still one of the biggest resources in Venezuela. And something else I found out was just pretty interesting was gold. A lot of gold in Venezuela. Venezuela, folks, has a lot of resources, a lot of natural resources, natural metals and things, okay? And again, if you go look at this opening scene in the second season of Jack Ryan, season 2, episode 1, where he's teaching looks like a bunch of CIA folks. He goes through all of this, okay? One of the last things he said, though, is this is a nation that's collapsing. And we all know that. Earlier tonight, I had a conversation with my son. He had been an LDS missionary in Fort Myers, Florida. And he came in contact with a lot of Venezuelans, uh, illegal immigrants that were coming to the Florida area. And one thing he told me, very fascinating, okay? He said, you go into a Venezuelan home, and in one corner of the living room or the kitchen would be a wood pallet with a lot of boxes on it. And what was happening was these Venezuelans were mailing food back to their families. And one particular gentleman, it was a couple, had recently arrived in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. And they had left Venezuela when I think he said one of the brothers and the grandfather were killed at a bank. These robbers will go to the banks on paydays and they'll wait for people to come out after being at the ATMs and they just take the money and they don't care about who they kill. That's one of the problems in Venezuela is these gangs have basically taken over. And Chavez and Maduro don't care. They're getting money from all these guys. But they had said they had moved out of Venezuela. They had to get out because they couldn't live there anymore. But in the corner of one of the rooms on a pallet, they had boxes. And my son would say, I'd bring like a can of chili or green beans or something like that, put it in the box, which they would tape up and mail to Venezuela. And a good portion of them didn't get through because they knew, oh, it's a box from the States. And in the Postal Service, they're all starving too. And so they'd start opening things up. They were still in communications with their families, but they were trying to get them all out because it was a failing state. It was a failed state. Excuse me, I'm the tail end of a cold. So life is pretty tough down there, all right? And you've got a lot of external influences that are trying to take over. And most of them are not good. Maduro's an avowed communist. And folks, you have to understand, maybe 20 years ago, Venezuela was a place people loved to go. Caracas, beautiful city. La Plaza, beautiful city, beautiful architecture, beautiful rainforests. I mean, just incredible beaches, places that were just scenic, great to go to, and it wasn't very expensive to go there. And now, if you're an American, you know, white skinned individual, you're going to get jacked up down there. You can't go there. It's not safe. It's just not safe to go there. And so we're going up against a failed state, a dictatorial leader with drug cartels entrenched in the place, gangs entrenched in the place, that has ties with Russia and Iran, and some pretty close ones. And like I said, I looked this up. It's a beautiful mosque. Oh my gosh. And it's huge in Venezuela. So think about that as we move closer to whatever's going to happen. Now, let's talk about what are our options down there and how should we go about this? We have already gone after, what is it, seven uh, narcotics carrying boats now, and they can't run away from us on the open sea. But I'm going to tell you, folks, maritime operations to interdict this stuff is a very, very hard target set, and rules of engagement have to be very clear because there's obviously the illicit substance boats running out of known ports in Venezuela, but there's also fishing boats too. And so now you've got non-combatants mixed with potential combatants, and it's like Iraq all over again, Afghanistan all over again. You have to be very careful about what you're expending ordnance on. So, first of all, let's talk about, again, the target cycle. Now, I use the target cycle that the Air Force used when I was in. That was find, fix, track, target, engage, assess. Okay. F2, T2, EA. Find, fix, track, target, engage, assess. The Army has simplified it to find, fix, and finish. So I'm going to use that simplified version of what we call our target cycle. When I was teaching at the Joint Forces Staff College, we used the F2T2EA. Find, fix, track, target, engage, assess. The assessment piece is probably the most important. Finding. How do we find targets in the Caribbean and in Venezuela? One of the first things, the first what we call vulnerability periods or VUL periods, when we began weapons school advanced integration, when all of the weapons school divisions were together, was what we called IPB of the battlefield, intelligence preparation of the battlefield. That intelligence preparation has been going on for a while, probably 2 to 3 months. It can be done with drones, obviously. A couple of these fleeing boats have been hit by Hellfire missiles from drones, uh, Reaper drones. You also have the B-52, and it supports a maritime role. And this is something that I learned when I was interviewing Chico Anderson on a previous podcast. The B-52 now has a maritime, we probably call it SCAR, okay? Strike Coordination, Attack, and Reconnaissance. It's basically going out and finding targets of opportunity. And of course, the B-52 has a sniper pod on it, a sniper XR, extended range. It's got a 40,000 foot laser. The laser will shoot 40,000 feet. That can not only track targets, identify targets, but also engage them with laser guided weapons. And there's numerous laser guided weapons that we can use now. The B-52 can stay on station for a very long time. It's got a crew of 4, 2 pilots, bombardier nav, and an electronic warfare officer downstairs. It is a great intelligence gathering platform with its electronic warfare suite, tied with the sniper targeting pod, and a crew of 4, and the platform's air refuelable. They probably get gas about every 5 hours. So for 5 hours, the B-52 can be out going back and forth in search patterns or using its electronic warfare suite and data link with the surface destroyers, cruisers, amphibious assault ships, and share their information. One thing that we have down there right now, and I didn't know that this was such a valuable intelligence asset, was a U.S. Navy sub, a fast attack submarine. Extremely stealthy, can get in very close, can deliver special forces like Navy SEALs. But it has a tremendous electronic suite on board that will allow it to passively, actively listen to things going on shore. This submarine XO showed us video and still pictures from one periscope sweep of a mountainside in a undisclosed location. We'll just say that. And he said the sweep was about 4 seconds from side to side. And they were able to take that video and find multiple areas of, I don't know what you call it, concern, targets in that. And he showed us some of the still pictures that were captured from the periscope of the sub. Now, obviously, the submarine can hear with its sonar system ships, but its ESM system can listen to a lot of things. And if anything radiates, then it's going to pick that up too, as well as the cruisers and destroyers. They have the SLQ-32 electronic support measures system on the cruisers and destroyers. They may be on the carriers too, but right now there's not a carrier down there. There's one on the way though, and I'll talk about it here in just a second. So you've got all of these things networked, and they're all sharing information. And of course, that sub can go up and down the coastline and gather intelligence, but you also have to remember they have Tomahawk land attack missiles. And I'll never forget something that a cruiser commander told a weapons school class as we were sitting in the officers' mess on a Aegis cruiser, the USS Princeton. The captain of the Princeton said, "I can kill anything out to 900 miles." 900 miles with Tomahawk land attack missiles. They have torpedoes, guns, Harpoon anti-ship missiles. The cruisers and the destroyers have a lot of weapons that they can employ to knock things down. And oh, something else that Jack Ryan episode also mentioned was ballistic missiles, if they're placed in Venezuela, can hit any portion of the southern United States in 30 minutes. Cuban Missile Crisis all over again. And again, these can be mobile. I don't know what their ballistic missile inventory is as we speak. I'll do a little more research on that. But that is a possibility. Those ballistic missiles are going to fly over a lot of places like Cuba and everything. But hey, if you're a communist dictator, do you care? Now, of course, the cruisers and the destroyers have proven with the SM-6 missile, they can knock those things down. They've proven it in the Middle East with the Houthis numerous times. Very, very capable system. And you throw into that mix the RC-135 Cobra Ball, RC-135 rivet joint, the E-2 Hawkeye AWACS airplane. I don't know how many E-3 AWACS Sentries we have left because they're all going to the boneyard. That is why the buy of the E-7 Wedgetail is so important. Oh, and also in this mix, you have the P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol airplane, which is a 737 replacement for the P-3. That's a very, very capable intelligence network gathering equipment and platforms, folks. And that's the one thing that we are really, really good at is intelligence gathering. I didn't say execution, okay? Because yes, there's been intelligence failures, all right? We gather a lot of intelligence information, folks. How we interpret it and disseminate it, we're not quite batting 1,000 on that. But it's almost information overload. And I've seen it during advanced integration at weapons school, where all of the platforms are working together during these different vol periods that we have. So finding targets, finding the locations ashore that we may want to strike, I don't think that's going to be too difficult. Because again, we're doing what's called an intelligence preparation of the battlefield SOAK, where we really, really have all the eyes, ears of our intelligence apparatus or system scouring Venezuela for potential targets. And they're building the strike folders with all the pictures and everything. I'm sure they are. Now, I want to add one thing to this. Today I read that the Gerald R. Ford carrier battle group is leaving European waters and is heading toward Venezuela. Steaming time from the, let's say, the Mediterranean to the Caribbean Sea north of Venezuela, probably about 3 days, 72 hours. Not going at flank speed, but going fast. And it's got cruisers, destroyers, and an entire air wing. on board. So when you talk an air campaign, I've already talked about some of the assets that we use to find what the target sets might be. But now we're going to include a carrier air wing with a Super Hornet deck. Oh, maybe it has F-35s. Shoot, I didn't look. I need to look that up. But you've got one of the newest class of carrier on its way down there. And I believe it's three Super Hornet squadrons and an F-35 squadron. And you have to remember, too, the amphibious assault ships, the Marine expeditionary units have F-35s on the big amphibs now, too. Roosevelt Roads has now become a very strategic and important location on Puerto Rico. Marine F-35s are there. There's probably other airplanes that are going to fly down there. Uh, it's got a fairly good sized ramp. But again, it could be mogged out, maximum aircraft on ground. Um, so you gotta watch that. And of course, keep it supplied. The bombers, B-1s, B-2s, B-52s, they'll come from the States. Barksdale, Dias in Texas. Uh, the B-2 stealth bombers always operate from beautiful Knob Noster, Missouri. And they probably don't need to be refueled on the way down, maybe on the way back. I don't know. It depends on, what they do. Uh, Dynamic targeting, in other words, time-sensitive targeting is going to be a very real thing during any Venezuelan or maritime attack operations on these speedboats, the point of origin that they're coming out of, and maybe some of these missile launchers, right? We did something during the second Gulf War, during the shock and awe campaign, that we'd not done previously. And that was putting B-1s on what we called on-call attack, X attack, as it shows up in the air tasking order. The B-1 has the ability to carry three different weapons in its weapon base. And I've talked about this before. You can put penetrators up front, put JDAM 31, Mark 84, Fat Boys in the middle, and we would put what was called the sensor fuse weapon, CBU 105, in the back. We have the ability now to do something very similar where they can carry those kinds of weapons and, of course, the JASM, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, to attack some of these targets. I've mentioned this before, and this is another reason why I'm so sorry to see the hogs leaving. We did a joint technology demonstration on how do we attack and rid ourselves of the Iranian patrol boats going through the Strait of Hormuz. And we found out the hogs were perfect for it. I mean, absolutely blew the uh, opposing force out of the water. They adjusted the close air support 9 line to make it maritime focused. And the battle managers and the AWACS took all that up, and the hogs just cleaned the opposing forces' clocks. We had like 12, I think it was. Again, these are drone target boats coming, and the hogs just ate their lunch. And of course, you've got the big gun, got Maverick missiles, but you also have the Falco missiles, the Advanced Precision K Weapon System, APKWS, laser guided, pods of seven. Strike Eagles are carrying six pods of them now, 42 of these missiles over in the Gulf, and they're very capable missiles. Oh, that's one thing I wanted to mention, and I mentioned it a little earlier. There was a time period a couple years ago, I think, where these Iranian patrol boats were harassing Navy ships as they were coming through the Strait of Hormuz. And they said, we got to do something about this, okay? Because you never know, one of these things is going to, you know, turn left and go after a carrier or a cruiser or something like that and blow it up, like the USS Cole down in Yemen. They had a very unusual loadout on the F-15s from Lakenheath. They were carrying, obviously, air-to-air missiles, AMRAAM, and Sidewinders. On one side, they were carrying four GBU-12 500-pound laser-guided bombs. And on the other side, they were carrying the CBU-105 sensor fused weapons. Had the sniper targeting pod, had the uh, lantern navigation pod, but on the center line, they were carrying a thing called Dragon Eye. And Dragon Eye's been around for a while now. And it's a large pod that you see on the belly of F-15Es, and now F-16s can carry them too. It is an AESA actively scanned array radar, much like I'm told the F-22 radar, in a pod on the bottom of the F-15E Strike Eagle. Now, most of the Strike Eagles at Seymour Johnson and I'm sure Mountain Home have these uh, active electronically scanned array radars in the nose, but there's something about this Dragon Eye pod that really sharpens the common operating picture of what's going on the surface. And there's very little written about what this pod does, how it does it. But my guess is it has a very stout moving target indicator type function in it. So if it's out and about, then it's picking up particularly speedboats that are running away from Venezuela and heading north, and is able to prioritize them, target them, share that information throughout the system so that others can join the fight. Yeah, the B1 has a moving target indicator MTI radar in it, F-15, F-16s with the new what is it called? Saber radar. And so in a maritime finding environment, those things become very critical because once you find the ship through one of these radar systems, then you go and put like a Predator full motion video platform over the top of it. And if it proves to be hostile and what that hostile criteria is going to be and how it shows hostile intent is to be written. Uh, and I'm not going to talk about that anyway. I have an idea what it would be. Then this entire system is going to find a lot of these things. A fishing boat does not do 30 knots in the water heading north. So there's very distinct signatures that you can use to help find these illicit substance illegal trafficking. We'll call it that, illegal trafficking ships on the ground. Now, I had somebody bring up something the other day that is most appropriate. We've hit 7 of these speeding narco boats recently, and there's been a lot of people asking the question, and rightfully so. Well, how do you know it was in it? if we've learned anything from our dealings with Saddam, he knew how to do counter targeting very well. And if you are a communist dictator, then putting innocent people in the boat to keep us from targeting it uh, is one of those viable options that we're going to have to deal with, right? Which means we can't hit it from the air, which means the Navy and the Coast Guard got to run the thing down. Is our video good enough to for us to be able to tell, hey, that's women and children on there? Yeah, actually, it's pretty good. We used to always say, some of our camera systems on our, we'll just say assets, could tell if it's a mustache or cleavage. That's the term we used. So that's something that we have to look at. What are the rules of engagement? The rules of engagement have to allow the United States military and the federal agents and federal agencies that are helping us track down these illicit boats and stop them. It's real easy to come in with a hog gun or a hellfire and just blow the thing away. But we've truly got to ask the question, what's really on the ship? All right. And like I said, there's certain signatures that these people know about in the military that are working this problem of these illicit substance boats that they're pretty sure when they launch weapons, they've got about probably a 90 to 95% um, assurance rate that it is what it is. The one recently looked like it was empty, it, or it had everything covered. One other thing I want to bring up too is I haven't mentioned the Coast Guard. Folks, the Coast Guard has been doing this interdiction stuff for a very long time, and they're very good at it. I posted just a couple days ago a U.S. Coast Guard door gunner with a Barrett's 50. Okay, I know I called it Maduce. All right. Yes, I know the difference between a Barrett's and the M2. Okay. I was going for the 50 cal thing. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But the the trigger puller is taking out the engines. And folks, they're very good at this, right? And a couple of years ago, they had the military sniper competition. Coast Guard won. That's against Army to include Special Forces, Navy to include SEAL teams, Air Force, which is our uh, security police and so forth. Coast Guard won the competition, and I understand won it handily. I want you to picture this in your mind. You have a speeding boat on the water. We'll just say outboard engines for right now, four of them. And you have a Coast Guard sniper that is taking all four engines out with a 50 caliber round on a boat that's maybe doing 25, 30 knots in the water, maybe more. That's pretty special. All right, so let's talk about, now that we've talked about finding, let's talk about fixing. This is a little tougher because now you have to prioritize your targets. Where in a campaign are we going to strike certain targets? We already know we haven't been real good at cleaning up after we've struck leadership targets. And that's one of the first things you've got to ask yourself is what's the end state of all of this? So when you're finding and now fixing, you have to go through this process of what do you leave Venezuela with? What do you take away? What do you leave them with? And of course, you have to think of the Venezuelan people. And I've said this before on other podcasts. Joint integrated fires, continuous intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and continuous humanitarian operations. Because, folks, this has the potential of being a really, really nasty humanitarian situation. You've already got a collapsing state. You've already got places with no running food, water, electricity, food. I mean, people that are starving, things like that. You know, is it our responsibility to rebuild Venezuela? That's all stuff you have to look at, folks. You really have to go into this air campaign thinking when I'm finding or excuse me, fixing, what am I fixing on? And what's the long-term effect of fixing on that particular target? The power grid, legitimate target because the power grid's feeding all of the military. It's also supporting the civilians. And as many of you know, it gets very, very warm and humid in Venezuela. So how do you fix these targets? There's a targeting board, and I call it a board for lack of a better term, and a process that we would go through with the strategy cell when we were developing the air campaign over Baghdad. What targets are going to hurt Maduro and put him on his knees tonight? Tonight. And so when you finally fix those targets, then of course you have to figure out, okay, now what assets am I going to use against him? I can't believe I can't believe that the mainstream media is already talking about we got special forces down there. That's dangerous, folks. And that's, to me, is unacceptable. None of that should ever come out. But now that we fix these targets, you have to prioritize them and say, okay, day one, here's what we're going to go after the first 24 hours. Day two, here's what we're going to go after in the next 24 hours. Day three, here's what we're going to go after, you know, in that 24-hour period. With the dilapidation of their air order of battle, we could potentially just lay bare the airspace over the top of Venezuela unless they get outside help, whatever that outside help may be. And this leads to finishing. How do you prioritize the targets? Is Maduro going to be a legitimate target? Because, like I said, we all understand, you know, when we got rid of Saddam and his sons, there was a void there that we weren't able to plug. And we have not been really good about taking care of countries after we've gone in and destroyed, the leadership, the infrastructure, the military, all those different things. All right. Finishing Venezuela is not going to be a long process. I've thought about today, are we really going to need ground forces? And we've seen the Marines doing their, beach assaults, practicing beach assaults, stuff like that. I don't know, folks. I really don't. Because I think they're walking into the trap, and the biggest trap that they're walking into is the humanitarian piece of this that is just awful. Just absolutely awful. The Seabees may be the most important piece to all of this when it comes time for us to go ashore. And their ability, and believe me, folks, the Seabees and what they do, the Navy Seabees and what they do is just incredible. The things that they can fix, the things that they can build are just fantastic. And the way that they do it is is just mind-blowing, okay? But when you get ashore, how are you going to deal with humanitarian peace? And I think that's one thing that the Trump administration really, really needs to take a very close look at. If we mess with this place and 80, 87, 85 to 87% of the population, the infrastructure, everything is already in shambles, then we leave the place pretty much laid bare. The whole world is going to come down on us, just like in Iraq. And folks, there was actually a very good plan for rebuilding Iraq. We rebuilt Japan and Germany after World War II, and the plan to rebuild Iraq was formatted on those two plans. Obviously the Marshall Plan in Europe, MacArthur and his plan in Japan, but it just wasn't followed. So I'm more concerned, folks, about if somebody were to ask me what my biggest concern about attacking Venezuela, it is the humanitarian piece after we've gone in there and schwacked whatever it is we're going to schwack. The leadership, the military, portions of the infrastructure that is already falling apart. It could be one of those very, very detrimental humanitarian things and an eyesore to us and an opportunity for some of our adversaries. As I mentioned, they're tied to Russia and Iran. And what if those countries come in and start rebuilding Venezuela and their image and their ideology? So we got to really take a hard look at the humanitarian piece. That's the thing that scares me the most. I've heard all the rhetoric, we're going to go in there in a couple days, we're going to take out narco terrorists, we're going to take out this, that, the other. But we're going to do it to a state that's pretty much failed already under this communist Chavez Maduro combination. And people are just flat out starving down there, like my son said. The illegal Venezuelans that were here in the United States when he was on his LDS mission to Fort Lauderdale were sending boxes of food home because they didn't have it. Looking through my notes here to see if there's anything else I missed. Uh, yeah, largest oil deposits on the planet, gold, and all the mines, more than all the mines of Africa. One of the few countries, the single countries that has the greatest resource on the planet Earth. And yet, a ballistic missile is 30 minutes away, launched from Venezuela. to U.S. soil. There you have it. Those are my thoughts as a guy who's been through a lot of schools in the military, who's done campaign planning. Bottom line, we can go in and wipe out Venezuela, particularly its military. If Maduro's smart, he'll leave, go to Russia. But we have a lot of players that are our active enemies that are not just Venezuelan, but Russia. And I get it. Russia is involved in a war with Ukraine, and they don't have a lot of assets and will to fight right now. Iranians do. They're mad at us. We just invaded their airspace and bombed a place. So they're kind of motivated. And again, go look up this mosque in Venezuela. It's incredible. That's all I got. The nation's dime. Diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. What happens if we go to Venezuela and maritime operations down in the Caribbean to try and bottle all this up? Folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I went and did a lot of research as I was looking all this stuff up, found some very interesting things. If you want to go to season 2 of Jack Ryan on Prime, the very first episode, he is giving a classroom discussion on Venezuela. And that came out, what, 3 years ago? And it's still true. What's going to happen in Venezuela right now? I don't know. As an air campaign planner, we follow a very set way of doing things. And I can see all of that culminating and happening right now. This episode is brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. Beautiful, detailed vinyl prints that you can peel off and stick on your walls of your home, office, or hangar. I've got one here above me, as you can see, my tanker when I was in Okinawa, Japan. It's 168 ready to print, or let us do a custom one for you. Fill out the custom form of your favorite airplane with your name on it, tail number, unit, weapons load. We can do it all. We have over 760 now drawings that we can do this stuff with. Next week on the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we're going to talk to a gentleman who is a medic in the Army, and he was involved in the Thunder Run into downtown Baghdad. We're going to talk to my buddy Doc, Jared, and he's got an amazing story to tell because he was also wounded and woke up in Landstuhl, Germany from one of his deployments. Folks, thanks for coming by the Lessons from the Cockpit show. Please subscribe. Join my Patreon at the All Ranks Club, which is in the links below. And please go by and purchase some of these wall prints because that's what keeps the show going. Thanks. Sluggo out here.